Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Thursday, April 27, 2023 Shenandoah County School Board work session to order at 5 o'clock. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Gutschall. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Keller. All those in favor? Say aye. Motion carried by a vote of 6-0. Okay, next on the agenda is the proposed adjustment to the physical budget. If my colleagues will permit me, I'd like to say a few words. Every morning I start my day listening to WPVR, and I think I brought this to y'all's attention. On Thursday is Thankful Thursday. And I am thankful, as I know my colleagues are, of the fine school system we have. So this was at 4 a.m. and I will always think that. All right, the budget that we approved last time that went to the Board of Supervisors, which I spoke and Ms. Walsh spoke for 6%. In that, we returned $3.5 million from 21-22 about surplus funds, and I think they are returning about half of that. Okay, let's go start with April 14th. I had a meeting with Ms. Shepard in her office at 2 o'clock, and she informed me that with what the Board of Supervisors approved prior to that in their resolution, they were only giving us $213,000 more. And I just thought that was not enough. So I left her office and on my own, I called Dennis Morris and talked to him about it, and he was surprised that figure was that low. On the 15th, Saturday, I texted Carl Ralston. He returned my call mid-morning. He was leaving town to fly to Vermont. I called Steve Baker, informed him also of the low figure of $213,000 additional funds over this year. I texted Brad Pollock and he returned my call and told him the same. I text Josh Stevens about it, and he did not return my call. Later that day, Carl Ralston called me, and we talked, and he was surprised at the low figure of $213,000. He said, when I get back in town on Monday, we will look at it. None of our discussions that I emphasized the minimum of $213,000. I didn't talk about a step. I just said the value, in my opinion, was low. And they met on Tuesday the 18th and had a discussion, and they approved an additional $700,000 for the school system. From the 14th to the 18th was a narrow window. I saw that. And they were going to approve their budget on the 18th with our school budget. And I thought if I could help that to get some more funds for our fine employees, that's what. I know some of my colleagues are probably upset with me, the community probably, but my intentions were good. And it was not a conspiracy between Andrew, Cindy, or me. It wasn't nothing that Miss Shepard did. It was me. So if anyone's at fault, it's me. And I take the blame for that. But I will take the blame for our employees, which we all know that we have. And you all got a copy of the recreation guide in the back of that, they recognize the accomplishments of our students, from FFA to fine arts, etc. The more trust. And then last week we had a staff recognition of the teachers in our various schools that do an admirable job, as many others. I did not mean to stir up. I was doing it in good faith. And Mr. Ralston called me once the uproar and asked me how I was doing. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the fine staff and Ms. Shepherd. We have a fine superintendent, but she does not take any of the credit. She gives the credit to her team, which many of you are around this table and in the schools. So, it's my blame. It's not the supervisors. I went to bat for our employees. And I'm not quite sure, if the window would have been wider, I would consult the board. But we had 4 days. And that's what happened. So, does any of my colleagues would like to say anything now before I turn it over to Ms. Shepherd?
So I'll say my part of it. I think what the Board of Supervisors did was took my public comment from the hearing and took what Marty was saying and put it together, although neither one of us asked them to do that. The only comments I made were in public. It was at the public hearing, and then it was at our board meeting when I asked whether the step had been left out on purpose or unintentionally. That's it. It's just one of those things that happens. There's no conspiracy. There's no us talking in the background and making a deal. It just happened.
Okay. Others?
Yeah, I have a few comments. You know, we sat in a meeting 2 weeks ago. The same meeting that Mrs. Walsh made those evening comments. Time at that point was to bring this up. We have procedures. And while I can appreciate, and I'm sure there's folks that are okay with you falling on your sword because you know you want to go to bat for them, we have procedures. We have it for a reason. 3 years ago, this board changed the name of schools in 8 days. Cost the taxpayers $350,000. They're still ticked off about it. We're paying back the IRS $140,000, money that we took erroneously, again, under the pretense of it's probably going to help our employees. So at what point do we do the right thing? At what point do we go, you know what, there's 6 of us here. We gave back $3.5 million over the budget that we had last year. We could have discussed it. Who took I mean, I don't know how we get here. I know when I listened to that meeting, and it said, we forgot the step. We didn't forget the step. Mr. Barlow made that motion without it. And in the back and forth, the fact that we struggle with parliamentary procedures, Kyle ended up making it again after we were corrected by someone in the audience. Again, it was a long night. We battled it out. We'd come to 6%. That's where we were. Now, whether it was you made such an eloquent argument that the Board of Supervisors decided to take it up. What I know is the few that I talked to had no idea what was going on when they walked into that meeting at 4 o'clock. Shenandoah County deserves better than that out of their folks that they've elected And I know that this is probably making a mountain out of a molehill, but it does mean something. We hold each other accountable for that reason. And while good intentions, you know, again, what you should have said is, you know, hold off, do something, we need to do something. That rate was published. You know, I don't know. I'm sorry that this was, you know, I found it awful that we did this, whatever the intentions were. And we always use it, it's for our teachers, it's always for this, it's always for that. We make excuses for it. Ironically, the IRS wanted their money back when we filled those things out wrong. And there was 2 doctorates at that point to look at those paperwork. The name change will probably come back and bite us, because we now have a Virginia Supreme Court ruling that says we couldn't have made those decisions during virtual meetings. We're better than this. And you know, I wish that I could come up here and apologize for making the stink of it, but I don't apologize for it at all.
Dennis?
The Robert's Rules of Order makes clear something that has been drilled into us who were recently elected. And we were, it was hammered into us that we do not act as separate entities on the board. We act as a board corporately. And we make the decisions as a group, and then those decisions are enforced. And we were told many times over that we, especially the chairman, has to keep that concept of neutrality and that concept of uniformity foremost. And there was enough time to call a separate meeting. There was enough time to at least call us and talk to us. But I didn't hear about this until it was a done deal and there was a public furor. And then I sent questions back and they were unanswered, although I did have members of the Board of Supervisors get in touch with me. One disconnect I'm having here is that apparently, Marty, you felt that there was something incorrect or you didn't like what the Board of Supervisors had done. And yet, the impression that the entire Board of Supervisors had was that this school board had fouled up, that we had made errors and we had made mistakes. And those comments were made at the open session of the last Board of Supervisors by their chairman. And their chairman alluded to arguments and comments that he had heard from 2 members of this board. And he said those seemed to be compelling, and so he convinced the rest of the Board of Supervisors to vote that way. So this was kind of a chairman-to-chairman communication at which this particular school board was singled out for, again, errors and mistakes. The only errors or mistakes might be the fact that as we discussed this issue, not every argument was made. That's not the purview of any one person to decide whether the proper arguments were made or not. The arguments were made, the debates were held, the decision was made. The job of the chairman is to be neutral and to hold the meetings, to make sure they go perfectly well, that everybody has a chance to speak. And in the extreme, to authenticate by his signature when necessary all the acts, orders, and proceedings of the assembly, and in general to represent and stand for the assembly. declaring its will and in all things obeying its commands. The chairman does not have the right to unilaterally decide what to do or to negotiate with any other board in our name. And so we were playing catch up in terms of our not only our reputation as a board, but also with where we were on this particular issue of the budget, in particular the salary raise. So there were probably ways through this for a work session or with some way of dealing with what Marty has indicated are figures from the Board of Supervisors he wasn't happy with. But apparently the message they got was that that he and Mrs. Walsh were not happy with what we had passed on this board, and that's troubling. Yeah, there have been a great deal of inconsistencies and procedural things that have put us in kind of a trick box tonight, and probably could have been avoided had we just done things properly and openly. There were, interestingly enough, 3 members of the school board who weren't being told about this particular action that the chairman and Mrs. Walsh were taking. So, in terms of discussing things with the Board of Supervisors. There are some that think that that's not a contravention of the norms, but as I read it, they are, and it certainly is what we were told when we took this office. Unfortunately, this isn't the first time this has happened. We have deviated from norms in the past, and we paid the price. And I wonder if it isn't time to hire a part-time parliamentarian who actually keep us in our lanes, because it's getting to be something that unfortunately pops up too often. That's all I have to say.
Others? Okay, moving on. Ms. Shepherd,
Yes, so
the adjustment of the 24 budget.
certainly. So on the screen, you'll see a presentation. This evening, we're going to talk about adjustments to the approved fiscal year 2024 budget based on the approved local and state appropriations. And I always like to start our budget conversations with our division goals: academic achievement and growth, positive school climate and culture, family engagement and community connections, recruit, support, and retain enthusiastic professionals, and then high quality and adequate facilities and learning environments. So on March 9th, the school board approved a budget, and here are the highlights from that approved budget. We had an increase in state funding of a little over $2.7 million, an increase, a slight increase of federal funding of $33,000, almost $34,000, a request for local appropriation to the operating budget of $800,000, a request for local appropriation for capital improvement projects in the amount of $3.1 million, and then also a reduction of 15 positions through resignation or retirement due to declining enrollment at $1.15 million. The request included a 6% salary increase, re-benchmark food service salary scales, which is a self-funded program. We wanted to put additional money towards our health insurance, and then allocate additional money because of the anticipated 15% increase. We wanted to add an HVAC program and an OT, occupational therapy, physical therapy aid program at Triplet Tech. We needed to increase our fuel budget due to inflation for transportation. And then we needed to add our local share for the Virginia Department of Education Security Equipment Grant that we receive every year, that we have not budgeted that local local match for. And then we asked for capital improvement plan funds for urgent and necessary projects. So what has changed since the March 9th, 2023 meeting? The General Assembly passed a skinny budget based on House Bill 1400 on April the 12th. The state budget includes $45 million for Shenandoah County Public Schools. This is an increase in state funding of $1.6 million above fiscal year 2023. We anticipate that the General Assembly will reconvene in June with some additional budget conversations. We're not sure what will come out of that. I know both the House and the Senate had proposed a bonus that did not make the skinny budget, but maybe it will make their June conversation. We're not sure. But we will come back to you in June if we receive any additional funding from the General Assembly or the state. The Shenandoah County Board of Supervisors approved their budget on Tuesday, April the 18th, which resulted in an increase of $874,000 for the operating budget and $1.5 million for urgent capital improvement projects. So recommended budget adjustments to the approved budget so we can balance our budget. So the adjustments would include either a 6% salary increase, which would be the cost of $3.4 million, or 5% salary increase plus step, which is $3.5 million. And the difference between that is $89,000. So if we approve the 6% salary increase, I would recommend that that additional $89,000 go towards health insurance to help decrease the health insurance rates, which we'll see in our next agenda item. And then we fund the urgent, not the urgent and necessary capital projects in the amount of $1.57 million. I'm recommending no change to re-benchmark the food service salary scales. Again, that is a self-funded program. I would like for us to continue the additional employer contribution towards our health insurance, and then to allocate the funding towards a health insurance increase, to add the HVAC and OT PT aid programs at Triplet Tech, increase the transportation budget for fuel, add the security grant to our match to our budget, and then disregard the last bullet there. And then here's a summary of what our of what the revenue would be. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from Ms. Shepherd?
What is the decline in enrollment at this point?
So
Say 10 years.
over the last 10 years, it's been, I would have to look. I just presented this to a group. So at one point we were at 6,000 students. We're at about 5,400 now, so 600. In the last 10 years, maybe in the last 12 years, I have to go back and refer to that. But we've had a significant decline. I presented that in one of our previous budget meetings, but it's been a decline over the last 15 years.
And as far as buildings go, have we built anything, done anything of that nature? I mean, our division pretty much has stayed the same. Buildings haven't changed. We haven't added, other than some renovations, we've not put up new buildings. We've not, okay. And our budget increase in the last 10 years, about how much approximately?
Are you looking for total budget, state, federal, or just county funded?
Well, as a total, I mean, how much what kind of increase have we had?
So in 2016-17, it was a total operating budget inclusive of CIP of 62,480, and again this year, you know, we're looking at inclusive of CIP and county technology is now added in, which back in 17 it wasn't, is, you know, about 79 million. So 17 million.
And the decrease in the number of students over the last 10 years has been 654. And that's K through 12. And 537 if you include the pre-K. So we've increased our pre-K offerings, but decreased students, but decreased in K through 12.
That information is on page 3 of the agenda, revenue trend.
I
Other questions? Okay, moving on. Ms. Shepherd, the health insurance renewal, please.
So if the budget is approved for the amount of money that we have asked for our health insurance premiums, we were able to do a significant decrease in the amount of health insurance premiums for our employees. And if there are 2 attachments to that document, it will show, one attachment will show the proposed health insurance premiums, and the second document will show the decrease in the cost of health insurance for our employees. So if approved at the May 11th meeting, then the most of our employees are on the Aetna 1000 with comprehensive dental. That employee plus family decreases from $1,250 to $913, which is a $337 decrease, which is significant. We're still not quite where we need to be with health insurance, but we are definitely headed in the right direction. For an employee plus child on that same plan and an employee plus spouse, it would be a $216 decrease. So we definitely are making headway in this area, and I'm very excited about that because you know, that's real money in our employees' pockets. Be happy to answer any questions about health insurance.
And high deductible health plans are scary to most people, but if you do the calculations, they're actually not a bad way to do insurance, and there's a significant savings in that one as well. I think it's $500 for a family. That's not bad.
And I believe, Ms. Hodges, we put, is it, how much in the health savings plan? Mm-hmm. Per month?
Per month.
Which is $1,500 per? In a health savings plan.
I'm a terrible budgeter, so I like the high deductible health plan because you know what's your money and how you're spending it. So if anybody wants to learn about it, I'm happy to tell them about it.
Thank you.
Other questions? Hearing none. Dr. Heingardner, policy updates.
All right, I have a couple here that you recently asked me about, and so I wanted to bring those to your attention, but of course we could talk about any of them that you may like. Let's first, if you don't mind, let's first look at the large group of policies. that are in board docs, and with reference specifically to policy DA that you had asked about before. And I just wanted to give you that feedback that I received when I checked on the why. I think that was the question, was why did that change? And
Dave, what page is that, please?
it's the third page.
Okay.
That, when I spoke with Elizabeth Ewing, the change from may be authorized to is authorized is to lessen the steps necessary for superintendents to manage their budgets. It does not have to be is authorized if the board feels otherwise. You can leave it the same, you can leave it as is, and it will still fall within the code section for this policy. So, you know, that was the reason, that was the why.
I'd like to see it change back, please. Is my thought.
That's, you know, that's the wishes of the board.
I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but oversight is,
Well,
not that I don't trust Mrs. Shepherd here, but I just think that, you know, the VSBA, one of their things is to slowly make stuff of this nature. And it erodes the responsibilities of the school board. I mean, we're ultimately responsible for the budget. I mean, it's ours. So, you know, and as long as there's someone there we can trust, that works out great. That's not always been the case in Shenandoah County in the past, so.
Oh, yeah, I thought that we would get an explanation somewhat like this. We're obviously trying to make things more efficient, quicker. And 99% of the time, that's going to be just fine. I think what we were looking for, or at least I was looking for, was something that we would be notified when that was going to happen if possible. And so my guess is we'll probably take a look at this and see if there's any, since it's possible now to modify our policy based on your explanation to us. We can go back in and the policy committee can look at that, present it to the committee, or to the board at large. And so I think we'll take that on as a committee assignment, Mr. Chair, so we'll take a look at that and see if there's any changes we'd like to make. But I think we'd stand firmly in support of superintendents being able to make these decisions efficiently and quickly, as long as we're notified and understand how they're being made. So we'll take a look at that.
Thank you.
Okay. I wanted to give you this one also, because it is, and I'm going to give you the copy of this because it'll just be easier to explain. I'll wait till everyone gets a copy. All right, if you lay these two copies down side by side, I've tried to put some scratch on there to make it easy to decipher what you're looking at in a fairly quick amount of time. If you look at the paper that has the logo at the top, that is our current board policy. That is in board docs. If you look at the other one, then I put draft at the top. It is from our school board attorney. It is used by other school divisions currently. And this has to do with public participation in school board meetings. And what I wanted to draw your attention to, if you look at them side by side, I can make a couple quick points and then you can discuss as you like. But the first big point I wanted to make is the numbers in our current board policy in red that I highlighted, those sentences or paragraph, those correspond to the same language in the draft that we received from our attorney. So you can see that basically the contents is pretty much the same in both. All right? So what you see in our current policy is also referenced in the draft policy from our attorney. However, here's the one caveat that I wanted to point out that I think Ms. Roots had questions about. If you look at number 2 in our current policy, you will see where it says, the school board will not hear public comments that involve a complaint about individual staff member, et cetera, et cetera. If you look at number 2 in the draft, which again is already used by some school divisions, they simply changed that language from will not hear to speakers should communicate concerns privately to the school principal, or complaints regarding division employees should be directed to the school principal. So that's kind of the wordsmithing a little bit as to what you desire. It also plays into sentence number 3 under decorum is also a part of that. Comments that are harassing or amount to personal attacks, et cetera, et cetera. You can read that. But that would also apply to our number 3 under decorum. The school board expects each speaker to be courteous. So I'm happy to modify these any way the board wishes, but that I just wanted you to see, and this is up to date with the most recent legal references. And honestly, I think this is from Fauquier County, but I could be wrong. But I know this is what our school board attorney sent me as an example of how that could be rephrased if you all want to do so.
Is this on the agenda for action for next month, or will it be, do you think?
Well, that was my intent, but it doesn't have to be for information, whatever you
No, that's
prefer.
okay. I was just curious how much time.
My intent was, unless you tell me otherwise, and it sounds like DA, we need to do some more work on, but that this will be information that will come back to you next time for approval. But we can change that however you see fit. Then if there were any other questions about any of the other policies that were in the packet, be happy to try and answer those. Those were the 2 specifically that you had asked me about.
Questions for Dr. Heingardner? The social media, you had got some feedback from the staff?
It did, and I'll tell you, Mr. Helsley, I'm glad you reminded me of that. It's back near the very, very back. One of the things that Ms. Hodges and I do as part of the orientation each year is, at the beginning of the school year, is we have a session on social media along with other topics, but that's just a part of a topic that we discuss with all new staff, and talking about the nuances, the great opportunity that social media plays, but also the dangers that social media plays, and how that needs to be treated professionally and in the right way. And sometimes staff are surprised to learn that things that they put on their social media account that is of a personal nature could be reflected back onto their employer, and the employer could end up having some discussions with them about it. So they find it a bit surprising, but that is reality. And so this policy really, that's one component of this policy, really does kind of substantiate that with policy that's written. Well, this is actually a regulation, but it would be in our policy manual. So that would help support that. But this also talks about social media use for clubs, and what they can and can't do with regards to the school logos and copyright issues with other products and things like that. So just to make sure everybody's, meeting the letter of the law with regards to social media.
Other questions? Okay. Proceeding to form Ms. Shepherd, the library book review announcement.
Yes, thank you. According to policy KLB, public review of learning resources library books. When a library book review process has been completed, the superintendent will announce the decision of the book review committee's decision. This is the public announcement for the book review held on Friday, April 14th, 2023 at the request of Amy Cooley. The book requested for review was the Holy Bible. The review committee voted to maintain the Holy Bible, New King James Version 1982, Revised Standard Version 1952, in the general library circulation.
Okay.
Can I make a comment, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
We really wanted to get this policy out there so that there'd be more community input on the review of library materials. And I think this particular case is kind of a litmus test that worked. And none of us here, I'm sure, put their fingers on the scales or went to see anybody or ask anybody how they were going to do this. We left it up to the system to work, and it did. And so for those who participated in the process, it took time and effort to do it. It wasn't unnoticed. We did notice it going forward, appreciated the professional manner with which the Shenandoah County Public School System did it, and did it professionally. And so I think the routine and the professional way it was accomplished, regardless of what the result may have been, I think is a testimony to the professionalism of the school system, and of the fact that kind of a policy can be instituted without fear of things going off the rails or taking too much time or going crazy. So I just want to thank the entire school system for being able to take yet another mission on and accomplishing it very quickly and efficiently.
Any other comments? Okay, moving on to 3. Ms. Shepherd, you have a recommendation for closed session, please.
I do. I recommend the School Board of Shenandoah County convene a closed meeting under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act in order to discuss and consider several personnel matters involving the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salary, discipline, or resignation of several employees of the Shenandoah County Public Schools under Virginia Code 2.2-3711A14, and for consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel. Nothing in this subdivision shall be construed to permit the closure of a meeting merely because an attorney representing the public body is in attendance or is consulted on a matter under Virginia Code 2.2-3711A8.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to that effect, please?
Yes, I move that the Shenandoah County School Board convene a closed meeting under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act in order to discuss and consider several personnel matters involving the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salary, discipline, or resignation under Virginia Code 2.2-3711A14, and for consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel. Nothing in this subdivision shall be construed to permit the closure of a meeting merely because an attorney representing the public body is in attendance or is consulted on a matter under Virginia Code 2.23711A8.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. Do we hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gutschall. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried by a vote of 6-0. The people in the audience, I cannot give you approximate time that we'll be out, but you're welcome to stay.
Be careful, be careful.
Yes, yes, yes.
Do I hear a motion to reconvene in open session, please?
I move to reconvene in open session.
Motion made by Mr. Gutschall. Do I hear a second?
A second.
Second by Ms. Roots. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried by a vote of 6-0. The Shenandoah County School Board hereby certifies by roll call vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certification resolution applies, and only such business matters as were identified in the motion convening in closed meeting was heard, discussed, or considered by the Shenandoah County School Board. Each member responds, "I so certified," when called by the clerk.
Ms. Walsh,
I so certify.
Mr. Gutschall,
I so certify.
Mr. Barlow,
I so certify.
Ms. Roots,
I so certify.
Mr. Keller,
I so certify.
and Mr. Helson.
I so certified. Okay, going on to action items. Do I hear a motion to approve the personnel?
I move to approve personnel.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. Do I hear a second?
A second.
Second by Mr. Barlow. All those in favor say, excuse me, roll call vote.
Mr. Barlow,
Aye.
Ms. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Gutschall,
Yes.
Ms. Roots,
Yes.
Mr. Keller,
Yes.
and Mr. Helson.
Yes. Going over to 4.2, adoption of the physical budget 2024. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the FY 2024 budget as presented with a 5% pay increase plus step for staff.
Motion made by Ms. Walsh to approve the 5% pay increase plus step. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Keller. Discussion.
We've heard from some folks in, by email, but I've heard from a lot more folks just running into them, soccer games and elsewhere, that they would prefer step versus the 6% because it keeps them moving in the right direction and makes their transfer more equitable if they move from division to division. That's it.
Okay, any other discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, when we look at how this was done, I think there was 3 board policies, board norms broken in this. And that doesn't even cover, of course, we don't get to, as school board members, now I can critique it as a private citizen, the actions of the Board of Supervisors on this. But, you know, going into the 14th, we were under the impression until that morning that, you know, what was approved was the 5%. To be honest with you, you know, I struggle with the fact that we even accept this because of how it was done. And I know that there's nobody in here that will agree with that. I mean, like I said, you know, take the money and run seems to be the narrative that that was done, and everybody seems to be okay with it. And I'll be honest with you, I struggle with it. Because it wasn't done properly. This board didn't do it properly, and the Board of Supervisors, you know, spent a half hour on the Board of Legal to make sure it was done, and then the taxpayers, it's just absolutely, they get, for lack of a better word, screwed all the way around. Because they're gonna end up paying debt service on stuff that they had cash for. And you know, the thing is, you know, that the way it was done won't play into the fact that you know, there's extra money here for, it'll be misconstrued that you know, that I'm not supporting teachers. You know, that's not the case at all. If we don't hang on our integrity and how things are done, what do we have? I mean, we can make deals on the weekends. We can put policies in place and nobody follows them. If we, you know, we answer, we are here because we were elected to do so. We not only are responsible for that budget and our responsibility to our teachers, we also are responsible to our constituents. And I think a whole lot of the time they are left out of it. In fact, the constituents in this county are narrowed and put to a minimum of 6 people that are benevolent to the needs of, you know, this body, which is the most expensive expenditure they have. And while that's great, everybody that ends up having to pay for this still, private sector isn't seeing the increases. We're seeing the increases in gas, we're seeing the increases in heat, we're seeing the increases in food. We didn't see an increase in Social Security. I mean, it gets tougher for everybody else who has to pay the bills on 25 cents extra in personal property taxes on, you know, a 15-year-old vehicle, and you know, their housing taxes going up. And it's again, where does it end? Just where does it end? So, you know, I don't know. I don't know how to proceed forward. I'll be honest with you.
I believe Social Security did get an increase of more than 5%.
Melody, can I ask, the step is always tied to a money figure? Are there steps without money involved? A step means that additional money is being included.
That's correct. It's a percentage, basically,
Okay.
of each of the.
So if
It's different on each scale
If-
as well.
If the step is not approved, then a teacher that's this year on step 10 will remain on step 10 next year.
So if a percentage is approved, a teacher who is on years of experience for 10, this is really difficult to explain, will move down to 11, but that salary that was at 10 will go down to
Right,
say year
okay,
11.
that's what.
And then you'll get a 5% or a 6%,
Right.
whatever that would look like. So it just shifts down.
If the 6% without a step were approved, now you had mentioned earlier that we would throw the rest of the money to offset insurance costs. Could that money also be used to add to or as a staff incentive at Christmas, for example?
So it's $89,000.
Right.
Would that? That would be $89 per person.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I thought so, but I just wanted to double check. Yeah. So the answer is yes.
Yeah, okay, okay. Or, I mean, I don't, if that were to be approved, I don't know that, I would like that money to be spent towards staff in some way or another. Not necessarily, although I think the insurance plan is a good idea. But I don't want that to be part of the formula, absolutely.
Right. And not all of our employees take Shenandoah County Health
I know,
Insurance.
right.
And I don't have that number, it's probably 6 between 600 and 700, I believe.
Is the step, I'm sorry.
Dennis?
No, it's just that under parliamentary procedure, each person's supposed to speak first before a person speaks second, so.
You're correct. My apologies.
No, we just have to follow the rules. So,
Dennis?
okay. So, I do agree that I have a problem with this process in that it's almost showcasing that the way it was done the last couple of weeks, that it's almost indicating that the ends justify the means, which I don't think is a good model for us to show to our staff or especially our students. However, I think we need to discuss this on its merits alone and kind of leave that one alone for a little bit. We've explained several times in this process, those of us who first asked for a 5 and then a 6% pay increase that we passed, is that we want to see that our teachers and our staff employees are treated well. And last year we did contemplate a 5% raise. We passed the 5% raise and contemplated a 5% raise this year. The legislature recommended a 7%, but they don't fund us. So that's nice for them to do. If they would come across and promise us to fund us for all of that, I'd take it in a heartbeat, but they didn't. So the 6% looked like a pretty good deal to me in that it takes into account the plight that the ordinary taxpayer has, yet it does do a double year increase for teachers. The problem with having so many or such high raises in tandem and then in the future is we don't know where our how many students we're going to have, what the future holds. Is it sustainable to have a 5% and then a 6%, and then also to increase the steps? At some point, we may be looking down the barrel at a reduction in force if we don't have as many students. And a reduction in force is no fun to go through. And whether that's less teachers or food service personnel, it's going to be painful, and it won't be fun. I have seen a school go through receivership because it lost its ability to pay for itself, and maybe that won't happen, but America's in an interesting financial era. I don't know. I'm also a little concerned that we have perhaps not taken into account equity of fare increases, in that we have not instituted yet a graduated pay raise. I think we probably need to look at that in the future. Probably too late at this point to be able to do that. So I think that like with most compromises, the 6% pay increase won't make anybody happy. But it's that kind of in the middle target where we do a very significant pay increase, but try to hold the line a little bit on increasing the step increase so that doesn't also get baked into the cake yet once again. So I feel that the 6% pay increase would probably be the most the proper way to go forward. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Other discussion?
Can it come back yet?
Randy?
Yeah, I forgot, kind of, Dennis, you hit some of those points. You know, we have folks on the bottom of our pay scales, that what this looks like, you know, are in need of that step. And then we have folks on the top end, you know, that step looks significantly different. You know, when you do those the math and things of that nature, it's a tough place to be, you know. Like I said, I'm a little resentful for having to have this discussion again after it was already done. I don't, you know, we just had a conversation with you know, a presentation. I probably should have asked, you know, what happens when you make a decision like this off of a false pretense, and that's what this was. So I don't know. I have a feeling that, you know, this puts us in a position that we're not going to make everybody happy at any point. And I wish, again, you know, if those steps is it built like this across education? You know, when you look at the steps, there is clearly some disparities on where that money ends up. You know, between the C and the D in some of those spots. It doesn't seem to help us on the bottom end of things. You know, parapros are one of the most hardest working folks that we have. They take a whole lot of brunt, a lot of you know, a lot of the really tough stuff, and they do it with grace. And like I said, I think 2 weeks ago I had a conversation with one who's been here 20 years and making 20 grand, and that's horrible. But loves their job. So, you know, the idea that money is everything to everybody. Our parapros are sure a fine example of the opposite. That they're not here for the money. They're here for the love of the kids and for the job. So.
Andrew?
Melody, what's the, in the event that we do not reach a consensus, what is the next step?
Then it comes back May the 11th.
To
We approved a budget.
right,
The numbers have changed
right.
from the county and from the state. So now we have to adopt a budget.
Okay, so,
It does not revert back to.
okay, so at the end of the day, or at the end of the time, we're going to have to come up with,
You're going to have an
right,
agreement.
okay.
Kyle, do you have anything? I have a couple more things.
I mean, the points have been made by everybody. I believe, I agree, the process was flawed. Whether or not we agreed on the step or not, we voted 4-2 that night on 6%, and we were given something differently back. But I believe that because what we agreed to was 6%, I think that's how we should move forward.
I have a couple follow-up things.
Okay, Cindy?
So I think I remembered why there's the jump from C to D, I believe, is because, for most positions, is because it's sort of a reward for sticking with the school system. So, you know, a lot of times teachers work for 1 or 2 years, we train them up, and they go somewhere else for more money. So I believe, I believe this happened before I was on the board, but someone explained it to me that was why. It was sort of a, okay, thanks for sticking with us. You're going to be with us for a while. So that's why that's why there's that little jump between C and D, I believe. You referenced the woman who made $20,000. Well, She didn't get steps all but 3 years of those 20 years. So if she had been getting steps all along, she wouldn't still be at 20 because her percentages would have been on a higher amount. So that's math. As far as students, losing students, yes, we have. We've lost 600 over 10 years. That's 6 per school per year. That's not eliminate a teacher position per year or anything like that. So what ends up happening is when we do not fill a position or decide to eliminate a position, the teachers actually have more responsibility because they have more kids. Their class sizes go up. So that's another thing that teachers should be rewarded for. Most teachers, when they sign contracts for the first time, had an expectation that they would get a step every year. It's the way it's done in Virginia. It's the way most government employees' contracts work. I bet Dennis got a step most of your life, right? Because you've been mostly government and military. I know that when I was government, I always got a step. It was really hard not to get a step, but you could be punished if you did something egregious and not get a step. But otherwise, the expectation was for a step every year. And then if you look at that historical thing, we've only started giving steps in the last 5 years, 6 years. They should have been getting steps all along. And we've made a little progress there. We've made some good progress on health insurance. I think that we need to keep making progress and not go back.
I don't recall teachers having that caveat of C and D where there would be a 3.9% increase.
So the scales that we revised last year, and there were 5 of them, I believe, nurses, parapros, teachers, we re-benchmarked.
Right.
Custodians, seems like there was a fifth one. Those did not have, because we revised them to have an actual percentage between each of the steps. So the ones we did not revise did have a 3.9% between each of them.
Right, which were not teachers.
Agreed.
Right.
Agreed.
So it just hasn't been addressed yet.
Yeah.
So just to comment about the whole step thing, yeah, once upon a time, I was going to be a teacher the rest of my life. And one of the things that was attractive or necessary perhaps was the fact that if one wanted to stay a teacher, then you basically would be classified as kind of a master teacher. In other words, that's what you did. That was your career. And while others would pick management or administration as a career path, teachers who didn't deign to do that, the only way they could kind of move up was through the step system. So that's exactly correct. It wasn't necessarily one every year. Sometimes it was 5 years before you hit the next step. That's back in the day. But nevertheless, there were steps. Nobody's talking about ending the step system, although it is arcane and it's hard to understand or even explain because there are a lot of subjectivity and so forth with it. So maybe it requires some degree of clarification even in the future as we go forward. But to me, the fact that we are increasing steps as we increase salary percentage, it's a straight percentage, and we do it on top of another, is just something that we have to, not just for taxpayers, but for the taxpayers' benefit, but also just that we don't increase so much in 1, 2 or 3 year stage that it's unsustainable, and we need to find out where we are. And I know it's not massive. I don't want it to be a massive cut. I want it to be something that's a slight cut, so that we don't have to bake this into the cake and watch it go up. So it's certainly not meant to be anti-teacher or the fact that we find our product to be unsatisfactory, but just a concern for viability for our taxpayers and for our system.
Mr. Chair, One more comment.
Andrew?
Melody, perhaps you could tell me, I taught for 33 years, 32, 33 years. I don't know how many of those years I got a step or didn't get a step. So there are times, though, that steps aren't included. There are times when they are, and it's based on some things that we don't always know why steps are included or not.
So I can give you a great example.
Okay.
So during the recession, many of the steps, many of the school divisions did not give a pay increase. So some of those years, some of those increases, or some of those salary scales went from 0 to 3 years of experience, 4 to 6 years of experience, 7 to 10 years of experience, because there was no additional money during the recession to give pay increases. So, and I can tell you that teachers and staff feel like they lost something during that time.
With no pay increase,
With
no
pay increase and
no step.
no way to
Right.
move to the next
Right.
to the next level. So that really, that's the best example that I can give, because it was, probably 13, 14 years ago.
Right. All right, I'm gonna take a broad statement here is that we have a tough job in that we're responsible for trying to make our schools great places for teachers and students, and also be aware of the impact when we do these things, the impact that it has on our community and citizens. That's tough. Anybody that tells you that it isn't is wrong. I'd say it's probably tougher than what the other board is doing. But having said that, I think we also need to look at, regardless of how it all came about, we initially were given 5%, and now we have the opportunity to do either a 5% in a step and a 6% for our teachers. So I can make an argument that that's a win as well. And I think as educators that it's important that we support our staff, and I feel like we do that. And as I say, it's not always easy because there's a lot of things to balance in the process. I'm done.
Melanie provided, and I assume everyone, about the step, how much it is from the different classifications. Teachers 1.1, parapros 1.5, custodian 1.5, bus drivers 1, and nurses 1.1, and administrators are less than 1. So if that's beneficial. And any other discussion? Okay, question on the motion, which is approve the 2024 budget as presented with a 5% pay increase plus a step. Roll call, please.
Mr. Barlow?
No.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Gutschall?
No.
Ms. Roots?
No.
Mr. Keller?
No.
Mr. Helsley?
Yes. So the motion failed 2 to 4. Okay, do I hear a new motion?
I don't know, is it possible to have a discussion before we make a motion? Probably not, so I'll just make if I may, Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion.
Please.
I move to approve the fiscal year 2024 budget as presented with a 6% pay increase for staff.
Do I hear a second? Motion made by Mr. Barlow. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gutschall. Discussion. Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Okay, I'm gonna read the motion again, because I wanna make sure I get it right. I move to approve the fiscal year 2024 budget as presented with a 6% pay increase for staff. Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Gutschall?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Helson?
Yes, motion carried by 6-0. Thank you all. And I think the meeting is adjourned at 7:20.